Beneath the Nevada desert, a secretive military command center detects mysterious alien ships hiding near Jupiter, ships that may be communicating with forces beyond our solar system. As Colonel Russell Gibson uncovers the chilling truth, he's thrust into humanity's first interstellar war aboard Deimos, Earth's newly unveiled warship armed with advanced tech and Hyperion torpedoes. With time running out, Gibson and his team must face an enemy decades ahead of us in technology, but unprepared for one thing: humanity's refusal to back down without a fight. Just a quick reminder before we get started. Only 4% of my viewers have subscribed to the channel so far. If you enjoy the content, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to hit that subscribe button and support the channel. Thank you so much. Now start amazing story.
We don't control the battlefield, Colonel. We just observe it. Until now. The subterranean complex was silent, but not still. Beneath the weather-worn Air Force proving ground in the Nevada desert, the command center of the Orbital Surveillance and Threat Response Command, OESTRC, pulsed with quiet urgency. Monitors tracked hundreds of orbital assets, civilian, military, foreign, and compromised. The air held a faint electrical hum, as if the servers themselves were tense with anticipation. Technical Sergeant Wade Manning rubbed his bloodshot eyes as he stared at the monitoring station. Third shift always felt the longest, especially when nothing happened. He reached for his coffee mug, lukewarm and bitter, just like his ex-wife's goodbye. Another quiet night. He muttered to himself, "Thank God for small mercies." The words had barely left his lips when the perimeter alert flashed. Manning straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. An unauthorized vehicle had just passed the outer checkpoint. "Security breach at Gate 7, announced the automated system. Manning's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Identify vehicle." "Unmarked." "Government sedan," replied the system. "Clearance code, Gibson Alpha 79er. Manning froze. Everyone in the facility knew that code. It belonged to the commanding officer, a man who rarely made appearances before noon and never without advance notice. "Alert the watch officer," Manning said, already reaching for the secure line. "Colonel Gibson is on site." In the middle of the command center stood a slowly rotating hologram of the solar system, scaled to include a perimeter extending just past Saturn. Glowing red anomalies drifted like dying embers among the celestial bodies, each tagged with tracking numbers and threat assessments. Colonel Russell Gibson entered with the unhurried confidence of someone long accustomed to bad news. In his mid-50s, his features bore the lean, weathered precision of a man carved by decades of classified wars. His short, steel-gray hair was combed in a no-nonsense military part, the sharp creases in his uniform offset by the faint lines etched beneath his deep-set green eyes. A scar ran just behind his left ear, an artifact of an incident never filed in any known service report. Born in Bakersfield, California, to a second-generation military family, Gibson had served in 3 branches, transferred through 4 different intelligence programs, and still managed to make himself indispensable. His voice was low and deliberate, the kind that made people lean in to listen rather than lean away. He carried no rank insignia. No one here needed reminding who he was. Lieutenant. Dwayne Phillips scrambled to his feet as Gibson entered the monitoring station. "Sir, we weren't expecting you until—" "Save it, Phillips," Gibson cut him off without breaking stride. "Where's Khan?" "Analysis section, sir. She's been there all night." Gibson nodded once. No surprise there. Specialist Amina Khan rarely left. Her post these days, not since they'd detected the first anomalous readings near Jupiter 3 weeks ago. As he moved through the facility, personnel straightened at their stations. Some saluted. Most simply nodded, knowing Gibson preferred efficiency to formality. The colonel had never been one for military pageantry. Even his uniform, meticulously pressed but devoid of ribbons or decorations, spoke to his preference. For substance over show. The analysis section was separated from the main command floor by a series of security checkpoints. Each one recognized Gibson biometrically. Retinal scan, gait analysis, even the unique electrical signature of his neural implant, a classified piece of tech that fewer than 50 people in the world knew existed. The final door hissed open, revealing a space that looked more like a university physics lab than a military installation. Holographic displays filled the air with swirling data patterns. Quantum processing stacks hummed along the walls, their cooling systems creating an artificial breeze that ruffled the papers scattered across the central workstation. Specialist Amina Khan was already standing when he approached the central table. Slender, sharp-featured, with high cheekbones and intense dark eyes, she wore her uniform with a meticulousness that bordered on obsessive. Her black hair was tied into a tight bun, and her caramel skin caught the dim light of the displays like bronze under glass. She moved with crisp, deliberate control, never fidgeting, never second-guessing. At just 28, she was one of the youngest analysts ever cleared for Tier 2 operations, but her resume read like a DoD myth. Top of her class at Georgia. Tech. A brief stint at JPL, followed by 3 years in DARPA's quantum modeling division, until Gibson personally recruited her. She'd broken Ostersee's object occlusion algorithm on a bet, then redesigned it over a weekend. Gibson trusted her instincts as much as her code. "Talk to me, Khan," he said. Stopping beside her, she didn't seem surprised by his early arrival. In fact, she looked as if she'd been expecting him. "Sir, I was about to call you." She tapped the console, bringing Jupiter into focus. "Another spike, sir. 3rd this month. Same signature. Gravitic displacement, cloaked in cosmic noise." "Where?" Gibson's eyes narrowed as he studied the display. "Callisto. Same triangulation we saw before, lined with Ganymede and Europa. Look." She layered the signals and phased them to real time. 3 subtle disruptions appeared in orbit, barely perceptible distortions, but repeating, deliberate. Patterns only machines could detect. Or Khan. Gibson folded his arms. "You run it through the correlation net?" She nodded. "Cross-checked with civilian astronomic stations, recon birds, even that old Russian grav-lens platform in decaying orbit. Everything confirms it's artificial." Her voice dropped slightly. "They're not moving. Just parked. Capital ships." Gibson's tone was flat, matter-of-fact, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the console. "That's my read." Khan pulled up a 3-dimensional rendering of the anomalies, highlighting their consistent positioning relative to Jupiter's moons. "The gravitational footprint matches what we'd expect from vessels of significant mass." Gibson remained silent for several long seconds, jaw tight. Then he turned to her. "You remember why I recruited you?" Khan blinked, momentarily thrown by the apparent non sequitur. "Because I always win my bets?" He gave the faintest smirk. "That, and you don't talk nonsense. Keep going." She flicked through data streams, calling up additional analyses. "There's more. Radiative backscatter along the moons. We think they're tapping into natural magnetospheres to mask their emissions. Smart if you're planning long-term staging without being seen. Or if you're preparing for something bigger." Gibson's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Khan hesitated, then pulled up another display. This one showing historical data from the past 6 months. "Sir, there's something else. The disruption patterns we're seeing, they've changed. Become more regular. Almost like they're communicating." Gibson finished for her. "Yes, sir, but not with Earth. With somewhere else." Gibson's eyes narrowed. "Show me." Khan's fingers danced across the display, calling up a visualization of signal patterns detected over time. "Here's the first anomaly we detected 4 months ago. Sporadic, seemingly random emissions. But look at the pattern now." The display shifted, showing the current readings. The emissions had become rhythmic, organized into distinct clusters, with regular intervals between them. "It's a conversation," Gibson murmured. "Or orders," Khan suggested. "Commands being relayed from somewhere beyond our detection range." Gibson straightened. "I need to make a call. Keep digging. I want to know everything about these signals, direction, frequency patterns, energy signatures." And Khan, she looked up from her console. "Sir, this stays in this room. Classification level, midnight black." Khan nodded, understanding the implication. Midnight black was a classification level so restricted that even acknowledging its existence was grounds for immediate detention. Whatever they had discovered, it had just become one of the most closely guarded secrets on the planet. "Yes, sir. Midnight black. October 15th, 2037. 0830 hours. Secure Communications Vault. Oesters Complex." Gibson stepped into the secure transmission vault, sealed behind layers of biometric locks. The walls shimmered slightly with quantum field encryption, air recycled every 20 seconds to avoid signal bleed. This was where the most sensitive communications in the complex took place, where decisions that might alter the course of human history were made without public knowledge or consent. He keyed in the priority code and dictated his report, his voice steady despite the implications of what he was about to relay. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. The Greys, the classification term for the non-terrestrial entities first confirmed in 1947 following the Roswell incident, had maintained a pattern of observation and occasional abduction for years. But this was different. This was coordinated. Military positioning. Gibson studied the holographic rendering of Jupiter hovering before him. The gas giant seemed peaceful, serene even, its swirling storms and bands of color betraying nothing of the potential threat lurking in the orbits of its moons. He paused before closing the channel. His tone shifted slightly, graver, quieter. After sending the transmission, Gibson remained in the vault, his reflection ghostly in the polished surface of the communication terminal. He thought about the implication of his request, the resources. It would divert, the panic it might cause if word leaked to the civilian population. But the alternative was unthinkable. The comms officer's voice came through the speaker. Message sent, sir. Encryption protocol shadowcast engaged. Estimated response time, 2 to 3 hours minimum. Acknowledged. I'll be in my office. October 15th, 2037, Sharas, 11:30. Hours. Gibson's. Office. Ostersee Complex. Gibson sat at his desk, surrounded by the trappings of a career spent in the shadows. The walls held no photographs, no personal mementos, only framed maps of various celestial bodies, and a single abstract painting that depicted what might have been a solar flare, or perhaps a mushroom cloud. The ambiguity seemed fitting. A knock. At the door pulled him from his thoughts. Enter! Khan stepped inside, a data tablet clutched in her hand. Sir, I've completed the signal analysis you requested. There's something you need to see. Gibson gestured to the chair across from his desk. Show me. She sat down and placed the tablet between them, triggering a holographic display. The communication. Patterns weren't just regular, they were building, increasing in frequency and complexity over the past week. And then the hologram showed a sudden spike in activity, followed by complete silence. They stopped. Gibson frowned. 18 minutes ago, Khan confirmed. All 3 vessels simultaneously ceased emissions. Gibson leaned back in his chair. They received their orders. That's my assessment, sir. Whatever they were waiting for, it's happening now. Before Gibson could respond, his secure communication terminal chimed. Incoming transmission from Strategic Command. Priority Alpha. Gibson glanced. At Khan. That was fast. Too fast. Sir, they should still be debating my recommendation. A response this quick means they already knew, Khan finished, her eyes widening with realization. Gibson nodded grimly. Exactly. Stay here. He activated the terminal, and the screen flared to life. The seal of U.S. Space Force Strategic. Command hovered for a moment, then faded to reveal General Renata Halverson. She was in her early 60s, but looked younger. Sharp jawline, silver-streaked auburn hair cropped to regulation length, and striking ice-blue eyes that missed nothing. Her posture was flawless, her shoulders squared in a matte black general's uniform with no unnecessary ornamentation. Her voice was calm, clipped, and steel-edged, like a blade sheathed in velvet. A first-generation immigrant from Norway, Halverson, had been one of the architects behind the reformation of the U.S. military's orbital doctrine. She rose through Air Force intelligence before being tapped for Space Force leadership, and her fingerprints were on nearly every black-budget space program in the last 20 years. She didn't speak unless there was a reason. And when she did, people listened. Presidents included. Colonel Gibson, she said without preamble. You were right. They're not staging. They've been in position longer than we realized. And we weren't going to tell you this yet, but given your findings, it's time. Gibson's expression remained neutral, but Khan noted the slight tensing of his shoulders, the only outward sign of his surprise. Time for what, General? She tapped. A control. A 3-dimensional schematic unfolded between them. Gibson's brow furrowed. What he saw was not a satellite array, not a ground-to-air defense grid. It was a warship, sleek, dark, angular. Its hull bore a name, USS Deimos. My God, Khan whispered, momentarily forgetting protocol. Halverson's eyes flicked to her, then back to Gibson. Project Ether has been in development since 2019, a joint effort between NATO and a few of our less official partners. We've been retrofitting orbital platforms using salvaged gray tech since the early 2000s. Deimos is the first destroyer-class vessel capable of deep space, maneuver and autonomous combat coordination. She's armed with advanced interceptor wings, drone deployment bays, and a dedicated AI warfare system. Gibson's expression didn't change, but his silence was telling. You're to relocate your entire Ostersea command team to the Deimos, Halverson continued, her tone brooking no argument. Effective immediately. Your operations will shift to orbital deployment. You're no longer just observing threats, Colonel. You're going to help neutralize them. What's the payload? Gibson asked, his military mind immediately focusing on offensive capabilities. Classified, but I'll give you a name. Hyperion torpedoes. The Deimos is carrying 6. That's all you get unless R&D gets a miracle. Gibson nodded once, absorbing the information. Report to Falcon Station within 24 hours, she added. Transport is en route. Congratulations, Colonel. You've just been reassigned to the first warship in human history designed for space-to-space combat. The transmission ended, leaving Gibson and Khan in stunned silence. Sir? Khan finally said, her voice barely audible. Did you know about this? Gibson shook his head slowly. No, not about Deimos. He turned to face her fully. But I suspected something was in development. Too many resources disappearing into black projects. Too many brilliant minds being recruited and then vanishing from public view. And now we're being deployed to space. Khan's voice held a mixture of awe and apprehension. On a warship. Not just deployed, Gibson corrected. We're being activated. There's a difference. Sir? Gibson's eyes were distant, calculating. Ostrich was never just an observation post, Khan. It was always intended to be the nerve center of something bigger. We weren't watching the stars just to catalog threats. We were gathering intelligence for the day we'd have to fight back. And that day is now, Khan said quietly. That day is now, Gibson confirmed. He stood, decision made. Gather the senior staff. Priority recall for all off-duty personnel. We have 24 hours to prepare for orbital deployment. Yes, sir. Khan rose to leave, but paused at the door. Colonel, do you think we're ready for this? For what's coming? Gibson considered the question for a long moment. No, but neither are they. They've been watching us for decades, studying our weaknesses, but they've never seen us fight back. Not really. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, not warm, not reassuring, but determined, predatory. Time to show them what they've been missing. October 15th, 2037. 23:45 hours. Osterk, Hangar Bay. Later, as the first of his analysts packed up data cores and long-range telemetry nodes, Gibson stood alone in the OSTRC hangar, reading over the Deimos partial spec sheet on his secured tablet. 3. Interceptor wings, AI-assisted flight and targeting, drone swarm integration, Hyperion torpedo launch system. Everything he didn't know Earth was ready to build, and everything the Greys never expected them to. It was more than he dared hope for. Staff Sergeant Elena Martinez approached, carrying a stack of secured hard drives. Sir, the last of the data cores are being prepped for transport. We'll be ready to move out at Mo 500. Gibson nodded. Good work, Sergeant. How's the team holding up? Martinez hesitated. Nervous, sir. Excited, but nervous. Most of them joined Ostersea to monitor threats, not to, well, engage them. And you, Sergeant? How are you feeling about all this? She straightened slightly. Ready to serve, sir. Gibson studied her for a moment, then nodded. Honesty, Martinez. That's what I need from my people right now. She relaxed slightly. Honestly, sir, I'm terrified, but also relieved, in a way. We've been watching these things for so long, knowing they were out there, wondering when they'd make their move. At least now we're doing something about it. That we are, Sergeant. That we are. After she left, Gibson looked up through the massive hangar ceiling where the stars hung invisible above tons of concrete and desert. For 30 years, he'd watched them, tracked shadows, interpreted whispers, wondered what war might look like when it finally came. Now he knew. He thought of his father, career Air Force, who told him stories of Cold War standoffs and the constant Vigilance required to maintain peace through strength. He thought of his grandfather, who'd flown bombers in World War II, facing an enemy whose technology had been roughly equivalent to his own. This would be different. They were outmatched, outgunned, dealing with technology so advanced it sometimes seemed like magic. But humans had one advantage the Greys might not have anticipated: the stubborn refusal to go quietly into extinction. "We watched the sky for too long," Gibson murmured. "Now it's time they watched us back." He closed the file and headed toward the personnel transport area. In less than 6 hours, he would leave Earth's surface, possibly for the last time. The thought should have troubled him more than it did. But as he walked through the corridors of the facility he had commanded for nearly a decade, what he felt wasn't regret or nostalgia, it was purpose. The war for Earth's survival was about to begin, and Russell Gibson intended to be on the front lines. "We don't control the battlefield, Colonel. We just observe it." Until now. The subterranean complex was silent, but not still. Beneath a weather-worn Air Force proving ground in the Nevada desert, the command center of the Orbital Surveillance and Threat Response Command, OSTARC, pulsed with quiet urgency. Monitors tracked hundreds of orbital assets, civilian, military, foreign, and compromised. The air held a faint electrical hum, as if the servers themselves were tense. In the middle of it all stood a slowly rotating hologram of the solar system, scaled to include a perimeter extending just past Saturn. Glowing red anomalies drifted, like dying embers. Colonel Russell Gibson entered with the unhurried confidence of someone long accustomed to bad news. In his mid-50s, his features bore the lean, weathered precision of a man carved by decades of classified wars. His short steel-gray hair was combed in a no-nonsense military part, the sharp creases in his uniform offset by the faint lines etched beneath his deep-set green eyes. A scar ran just behind his left ear, an artifact of an incident never filed in any known service report. Born in Bakersfield, California, to a second-generation military family, Gibson had served in 3 branches, transferred through 4 different intelligence programs, and still managed to make himself indispensable. His voice was low and deliberate, the kind that made people lean in to listen rather than lean away. He carried no rank insignia. No one here needed reminding who he was. Specialist Amina Khan was already standing when he approached the central table. Slender, sharp-featured, with high cheekbones and intense dark eyes, she wore her uniform with a meticulousness that bordered on obsessive. Her black hair was tied into a tight bun, and her caramel skin caught the dim light of the displays like bronze under glass. She moved with crisp, deliberate control, never fidgeting, never second-guessing. At just 28, she was one of the youngest analysts ever cleared for Tier 2 operations, but her resume read like a DoD myth. Top of her class at Georgia. Tech, a brief stint at JPL, followed by 3 years in DARPA's quantum modeling division, until Gibson personally recruited her. She'd broken Ostersee's object occlusion algorithm on a bet, then redesigned it over a weekend. Gibson trusted her instincts as much as her code. "Talk to me, Khan," he said, stopping beside her. She tapped the console, bringing Jupiter into focus. "Another spike, sir. 3rd this month, same signature, gravitic displacement, cloaked in cosmic noise." "Where?" "Callisto. Same triangulation we saw before, lined with Ganymede and Europa. Look." She layered the signals and phased them to real time. 3 subtle disruptions appeared in orbit. Barely perceptible distortions, but repeating, deliberate. Patterns only machines could detect. Or Khan. Gibson folded his arms. "You run it through the correlation net?" She nodded. Cross-checked with civilian astronomic stations, recon birds, even that old Russian Gravlens platform in decaying orbit. Everything confirms it's artificial. They're not moving. Just parked. Capital ships. "That's my read?" Gibson remained silent for several long seconds, jaw tight. Then he turned to her. "You remember why I recruited you?" Khan blinked. "Because I always win my bets?" He gave the faintest smirk. "That, and you don't talk nonsense. Keep going." She flicked through data streams. "There's more. Radiative backscatter along the moons. We think they're tapping into natural magnetospheres to mask their emissions. Smart if you're planning long-term staging without being seen. Or if you're preparing for something bigger." Gibson stepped into the secure transmission vault, sealed behind layers of biometric locks. The walls shimmered slightly with quantum field encryption, air recycled every 20 seconds. To avoid signal bleed, he keyed in the priority code and dictated his report. He paused before closing the channel. His tone shifted slightly. graver, quieter. 3 hours later, in the command center's dim lighting, the screen flared to life. The seal of U.S. Space Force Strategic Command hovered for a moment, then faded to reveal General Renata Halverson. She was in her early 60s, but looked younger. Sharp jawline, silver-streaked auburn hair cropped to regulation length, and striking ice blue eyes that missed nothing. Her posture was flawless, her shoulders squared in a matte black general's uniform with no unnecessary ornamentation. Her voice was calm, clipped, and steel-edged, like a blade sheathed in velvet. A first-generation immigrant from Norway, Halverson had been one of the architects behind the reformation of the U.S. military's orbital doctrine. She rose through Air Force intelligence before being tapped for Space Force leadership, and her fingerprints were on nearly every black-budget space program in the last 20 years. She didn't speak unless there was a reason, and when she did, people listened, presidents included. "Colonel Gibson," she said, "you were right. They're not staging. They've been in position longer than we realized. And we weren't going to tell you this yet, but given your findings, it's time." She tapped a control. A three-dimensional schematic unfolded. Gibson's brow furrowed. What he saw was not a satellite array, not a ground-to-air defense grid. It was a warship, sleek, dark, angular. Its hull bore a name, USS Deimos. Project Ether has been in development since 2019, a joint effort between NATO and a few of our less official partners. We've been retrofitting orbital platforms using salvaged gray tech since the early 2000s. Deimos is the first destroyer-class vessel capable of deep space maneuver and autonomous combat coordination. She's armed with advanced interceptor wings, drone deployment bays, and a dedicated AI warfare system. Gibson's expression didn't change, but his silence was telling. "You're to relocate your entire O-Star-C command team to the Deimos," Halverson said. "Effective immediately. Your operations will shift to orbital deployment. You're no longer just observing threats, Colonel. You're going to help neutralize them." "What's the payload?" "Classified, but I'll give you a name. Hyperion torpedoes. The Deimos is carrying 6. That's all you get unless R&D gets a miracle." Gibson nodded once. "Report to Falcon Station within 24 hours, she added. "Transport is en route. Congratulations, Colonel. You've just been reassigned to the first warship in human history designed for space-to-space combat." Later, as the first of his analysts packed up data cores and long-range telemetry nodes, Gibson stood alone in the OSTRC hangar, reading over the Deimos partial spec sheet. 3 interceptor wings, AI-assisted flight and targeting, drone swarm integration, Hyperion torpedo launch system. Everything he didn't know Earth was ready to build, and everything the Greys never expected them to. It was more than he dared hope for. He looked up through the massive hangar ceiling, where the stars hung invisible above tons of concrete. And desert. For 30 years he'd watched them, tracked shadows, interpreted whispers, wondered what war might look like when it finally came. Now he knew. The sky's no longer a ceiling. It's a threshold. The launch platform at Falcon Station had no insignia, no designation, and officially didn't exist. A battered C5M super galaxy had delivered them under the cover of night, its massive silhouette barely visible against the star-speckled sky. The transport had flown a deliberately convoluted path, first north toward Canada, then east over the Atlantic before doubling back toward the southwestern United States. Standard counter-surveillance protocol for midnight black operations. Major. Teresa Reyes, the transport coordinator, met Gibson at the base of the aircraft's loading ramp. Her face was weathered from years of desert deployments, her eyes constantly scanning the perimeter. "Welcome to Falcon Station, Colonel," she said, her voice low. Not exactly the red carpet treatment you might have expected. Gibson adjusted, his duffel bag on his shoulder. "I've never been one for carpets, Major. Red or otherwise." Reyes almost smiled. "Your team will be processed through the main hangar. You're coming with me." From there, Gibson and his core team were transferred to a pressurized personnel carrier. Unmarked, quiet, and sealed tighter than anything short of a cryogenic vault. The desert wind howled across the tarmac, but inside, everything was still. "This feels like a funeral procession," Specialist Khan whispered, glancing around at the somber faces of her colleagues. Dr. Nathan Harper, Ostersea's lead xenobiology expert, leaned forward. "More like a birth canal," he said quietly. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes. "We're being reborn. stepping into something entirely new. "Save the poetry for your reports, Doc?" Lieutenant Alan Rivera said, shifting uncomfortably in his tactical gear. "And save the enthusiasm for when we know what we're up against." Gibson said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the small viewing port, watching the landscape blur past. The American Southwest had always reminded him of Mars, desolate, unforgiving, alien in its own way. How fitting that it would be the last piece of Earth beneath his feet before he left the planet. The carrier slowed as they approached an unassuming ridgeline. To the untrained eye, the area appeared to be nothing more than another stretch of Nevada desert. But Gibson knew better. He'd seen the classified satellite footage, the thermal imaging scans that revealed the true scale of what lay beneath the sand and rock. They arrived at a domed structure built into the side of the ridgeline, disguised as a geological survey bunker. 2 guards stepped forward, their faces hidden behind polarized tactical visors. They said nothing as they scanned each passenger with handheld quantum identity verifiers, devices that confirmed not just identity, but current brain pattern matching. "Identity confirmed," one of them said mechanically as Gibson's scan completed. "Colonel Russell Gibson, clearance Midnight Black. Proceed to pre-launch." Inside was the launch tube, a vertical shaft that plunged deep into the Earth before angling upward toward the sky. The engineering behind it was a marvel, combining conventional electromagnetic acceleration with recovered alien tech that manipulated gravitational fields for a smoother, more efficient ascent. "This is where we part ways," Major Reyes said, extending her hand. "It's been an honor, Colonel." Gibson shook it firmly. "Keep the lights on, Major. We may need to come home in a hurry." "Home will be waiting," she replied. "Good hunting." The capsule awaited them like a waiting coffin. Sleek, cylindrical, matte black with no markings and no windows. Inside, the seats were molded into the frame like a pressure-molded exoskeleton. "Pretty fancy for a taxi," Rivera quipped, though. His attempt at humor fell flat in the tense atmosphere. Gibson sat first, strapping in, his eyes on the ceiling, which pulsed with a faint blue light. The rest of the team followed suit, their movements precise, practiced from countless drills and simulations. Khan settled into the seat beside him, her face betraying a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Gibson nodded. "Are we coming back?" The question hung in the air, raw and honest. Gibson considered her for a moment. "That's the plan. But plans change." "Always the optimist," Dr. Harper muttered from across the cabin. "Realism isn't pessimism, Doc," Gibson replied. "It's preparation." The capsule's launch controller, a young lieutenant with the name tag Chang, performed one final systems check. "Capsule sealed and pressurized. Life support optimal. Repulsor coils charging. Launch sequence initiating in T-2 minutes. Gibson had taken dozens of covert airlift deployments in his career. None of them felt this final. "Everyone check your harnesses," he ordered. "First orbital launch is always the worst." Rivera glanced around nervously. "Worst how, exactly?" "You're about to find out," Khan said with a tight smile. This wasn't her first trip to space. She'd done a 6-month rotation on the International Space Station before being recruited to Osterk. The capsule's ignition sequence began with a whisper. No fire, no roar, just a magnetic thrum as the repulsor. Coils hummed to life. A low-frequency vibration passed through Gibson's spine, like the moment before a lightning strike. "Repulsor matrix engaged," Chang reported. "Gravitational compensation active. Launch in 3, 2, 1. And then they moved. The acceleration was nothing like a conventional rocket launch. Instead of the bone-crushing pressure Gibson had expected, it felt more like an elevator ascending at impossible speed, a steady, inexorable pull upward. The capsule accelerated in a perfect vertical climb, transitioning from atmospheric silence to the higher tremble of thin air friction. 30 kilometers and climbing, Chang announced, his voice steady despite the unprecedented nature of their journey. Transitioning to exo-atmospheric flight path, then came weightlessness. His stomach turned, but he kept his eyes on the ceiling, watching the internal HUD scroll with altitude metrics and vector corrections. Dr. Harper let out a small sound that might have been discomfort or exhilaration. "The artificial gravity will kick in soon, yes?" "Once we're on final approach," Khan confirmed. "For now, enjoy floating." "Easy for you to say," Rivera groaned, his face taking on a greenish tinge. "Breathe through your nose, Lieutenant," Gibson advised. "Focus on a fixed point. The trip to orbit took just under 20 minutes, a testament to the advanced propulsion system that powered their ascent. Throughout the journey, Chang monitored their trajectory, making minute adjustments to compensate for atmospheric conditions and orbital debris. There was no view, only data. Outside, the Earth fell away, the capsule arcing through an optimized, parabolic path, aiming for an orbital insertion point triangulated to an invisible station. Approaching rendezvous coordinates, Chang reported, USS Deimos is on station and awaiting our arrival. Gibson felt a subtle shift in the capsule's momentum as it adjusted its course for the final approach. The HUD displayed a wireframe representation of their target, a massive angular shape against the backdrop of Earth's curvature. Look alive, people, Gibson said. We're almost there. October 16th, 2037. Go 20 hours. GMT, USS Deimos, orbit. The docking approach was surgical. A soft magnetic lock clamped the capsule into a lateral intake bay beneath the Deimos' primary spine. Gibson felt the moment the capsule sealed itself to the hull. A slight jolt, then silence. The air pressure equalized. Locking clamps hissed. And then the airlock opened. The USS Deimos loomed like a blade of midnight steel against the curve of Earth's shadow. Not aerodynamic, optimized. Her hull was built with minimal curvature, flat-edge plating layered in interlocking V-patterns, more akin to a weapon than a ship. The exterior shimmered subtly, coated in radar-absorbent polymer flecked with unknown alloys. My God, Dr. Harper whispered as they emerged from the capsule into the docking bay. It's beautiful. Inside, the gravity felt lighter, artificial, but steady. The corridor lights were angled to reduce reflection, giving every passage a twilight hue. Not a single sharp edge existed on the interior architecture. Everything was recessed, modular, and tight. Gravity's at about 80% Earth normal, Khan observed, bouncing slightly on her toes. Makes movement more efficient. And combat more deadly, Gibson added. Less resistance means faster strikes, further throws. As they stepped fully out of the capsule, a voice greeted them. Not over comms, not through speakers. It was everywhere at once. Welcome aboard, Colonel Russell Gibson. The USS Deimos acknowledges your authority. Gibson froze. The voice wasn't synthetic in the traditional sense. It was warm, controlled, introspective even. Not quite human, but not robotic either. He'd reviewed specs on prototype military AI before, but nothing had ever sounded like this. Amina Khan shot him a wide-eyed glance. He nodded slowly, as if to ground himself. That the AI? He asked aloud. Yes, Colonel, the voice said. I am Deimos. I operate as the Integrated Command Interface, Mission Analytics Core, and Tactical Execution Proxy. My directive is to assist. You. Rivera's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, a reflexive reaction to the disembodied voice. They didn't tell us it would be this present. Stand down, Lieutenant, Gibson ordered quietly. It's part of the ship. More accurately, Colonel, Deimos interjected, I am the ship. Though I maintain distinct processing nodes throughout the vessel, my consciousness is distributed across all systems. Consciousness, Dr. Harper repeated, his scientific curiosity evident. An interesting choice of words. The most accurate term available in your lexicon, Deimos replied, though perhaps imperfect. As Gibson moved forward, his mind buzzed with silent calculations. If this AI was truly self-optimizing, capable of emergent decision-making, it wasn't just a tool, it was a crew member. Possibly the most competent one aboard. Khan mouthed, creepy. But she was grinning. Her eyes were already darting around, absorbing every inch of the ship. Deimos, Gibson addressed the AI directly. What's our current readiness status? All systems operational at 97% capacity, Deimos replied. Weapon systems primed but safetied. Interceptor wings on standby. Defensive countermeasures at ready status. We await only your command team's integration to achieve full battle capability. Gibson nodded. And the captain? Captain Rourke awaits. You in the hangar deck. He's been notified of your arrival. Well then, Gibson said, squaring his shoulders. Let's not keep the man waiting. October 16th, 2037, 0230 hours. GMT, hangar deck, USS Deimos. The hangar deck was a marvel of engineering efficiency. Unlike the cavernous spaces of traditional aircraft carriers, every cubic meter was optimized for rapid deployment and recovery. Interceptors, sleek predatory craft unlike any air-breathing fighter, were nested in launch cradles along the walls, their surfaces gleaming with the same radar-absorbent coating as the Deimos herself. Maintenance crews moved with purpose, their actions choreographed with minimal wasted motion. Robotic arms swung through pre-programmed sequences, performing diagnostic checks and minor repairs without human intervention. They were met in the hangar deck by Captain Elias Rourke. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the unmistakable bearing of an academy man, Rourke had the look of a naval officer carved out of marble. His eyes were storm gray, and his expression had the welcoming warmth of a steel door. "Colonel Gibson, welcome to my ship." Gibson extended a hand. "Appreciate the ride." "Captain," Rourke shook it. Brief, firm. "Let's make one thing clear. Command may have assigned you this integration, but while you're aboard, this ship answers to naval doctrine. Chain of command isn't a suggestion." Gibson didn't blink. "Chain of command ends where the enemy begins. I don't care who runs the mess. Hall captain. But if something with black eyes and no heartbeat cuts through that hull, you defer to me." The tension was palpable. Rivera shifted uncomfortably behind Gibson. Khan watched the exchange with analytical detachment. Dr. Harper seemed oblivious, his attention already captured by the marvels of the hangar deck. Rourke studied Gibson for a beat, then nodded. "Fair enough." A slight relaxation rippled through. The Ostersee team. The first potential conflict had been navigated, if not entirely resolved. "Your quarters have been prepared," Rourke continued, his tone shifting to a more professional register. "Deimos will guide you there. Get settled, then report to the CIC at 0300 for operational briefing." "We'll be there," Gibson confirmed. Gibson walked away. Rourke watched him with narrowed eyes. He'd expected a Black Ops spook with a chip on his shoulder, maybe even a desk jockey with clearance and ego. But this man was calm, measured, unimpressed, and when he spoke, Rourke got the feeling he wasn't quoting doctrine, he was quoting experience. That made him dangerous. "Captain Rourke seems intense," Dr. Harper observed as they made their way to their quarters. "He's Navy," Khan replied, as if that explained everything. "Old school." "He's protecting his territory," Gibson corrected. "And I don't blame him. We're the interlopers here." "But we have the expertise," Rivera pointed out. "We've been tracking the Greys for years." "Expertise doesn't automatically command respect, Lieutenant," Gibson said. "Out here, results do. And right now, we haven't delivered any." The corridor branched, leading them into the crew quarters section. Unlike the Spartan military barracks most of them were accustomed to, these spaces were designed for long-duration deployment, compact but thoughtfully arranged, with personal storage, communication terminals, and privacy screens. "Your personal effects have been transferred to your assigned quarters," Deimos informed them. "Colonel Gibson, your command suite is adjacent to the Ostrich module for operational efficiency." "Thank you, Deimos," Gibson replied, still uncomfortable with addressing empty air. "You are welcome, Colonel. May I answer any immediate questions about the ship's capabilities or your accommodations?" Gibson exchanged glances with his team. "Give us some time to get oriented. We'll reconvene in the Ostrich module at 0245 hours. "Understood. I will remain available for assistance as needed." As the AI's presence seemed to recede, Gibson addressed his team one final time before they dispersed. "Get settled. Stay focused." "Remember why we're here," Khan nodded. "To protect Earth." "No," Gibson corrected her. "To ensure there's still an Earth worth protecting when this is over." October 16th, 2037. 0245. Hours. GMT, CIC, USS Deimos. The CIC was more cathedral than command center. A central display rose in a dome above the command chair, layered with holographic telemetry, starfield overlays, and Ostrich's updated satellite lattice. Around the perimeter, modular control stations interfaced with drone squadrons, interceptor wings, targeting relays, and engineering systems. Two of the wings, Alpha and Beta, were already staffed, their pilots running diagnostics on drone. Tether sinks. Gibson stood at the entrance for a moment, taking it all in. The technology on display was decades beyond anything he'd seen in even the most advanced terrestrial facilities. Some of it, he suspected, wasn't entirely human in origin. "Impressive, isn't it?" Captain Rourke had appeared at his side. "First time I walked in here, I thought I'd stepped onto a movie set." Fiction has a way of becoming reality, Gibson replied, especially when the alternative is extinction. Rourke's expression softened slightly. You really believe it's that dire? A full-scale invasion? The Greys haven't been building up their presence in our solar system just to say hello, Captain. They've been testing our defenses, probing our response capabilities, and harvesting biological samples, Rourke added. The abduction records are just the tip of the iceberg, Gibson finished. For every documented case, there are dozens more that go unreported. They've been studying us for generations, cataloging our strengths, our weaknesses, our biology. Dr. Harper interjected, joining them. He carried a data tablet displaying complex genetic sequences. The abduction patterns suggest they're particularly interested in our genetic diversity, possibly for hybridization experiments. Rourke frowned. To what end? Hard to say without more data, Harper admitted. But based on what we've pieced together, they might be facing some kind of genetic bottleneck, low reproduction rates, cellular degradation, systemic immune issues. They're dying, Gibson said bluntly, and they think we might hold the cure. Standing at the main tactical table was Major Kira Velan, Tactical Wing Commander for Alpha Wing. She gave Gibson a nod, her face composed but eyes sharp. Colonel, I've reviewed the Interceptor's loadouts. Your drone doctrine's unorthodox, but I like it. Each bird in my wing will fly with a default config. 3 gun drones, 1 sensor, 1 deflector, and 1 missile pod. Change based on the mission profile, Gibson replied. Drone AI is flexible. You'll learn to treat them like wolves, not sheep. Wolves. Got it. Valen was in her late 30s, with close-cropped black hair and the lean physique of someone who spent more time in zero-G simulators than planet-side gyms. Her service record included 3 tours in the Air Force's Experimental Aircraft Division before being recruited for Project Ether. She had more combat flight hours than anyone else on the ship, though none against extraterrestrial targets. Your people ready for this? Gibson asked her quietly. Ready as they'll ever be, she replied. They've run the sims, aced the drills, but there's no substitute for actual combat experience against these things. No one has that experience. Major, not really. We've observed, we've theorized, but we've never engaged directly, not at this scale. And now we're going to, she said. It wasn't a question. Now we're going to, Gibson confirmed. As he walked on, Valen watched him go. She'd flown under 4 COs in her career, each one either arrogant, detached, or just slow. Gibson wasn't any of those. He had that quiet, ready weight behind his words, and he'd called the drones wolves. That meant he understood what it took to survive a real fight. October 16th, 2037. 0300 hours. GMT. Ostersea Module, USS Deimos. Back in the modular space carved out for the Ostersea integration node, Khan brought the orbital array online. One by one, the satellite feeds resumed, enhanced by the ship's long-range sensors and faster-than-light waveform modeling systems. Signal integrity holding, she said. Cross-link stable. AI enhancement layers coming online now. The screens. Around them bloomed with data. Orbital tracks, threat assessments, gravitic anomaly plots, all rendered in crystal-clear holographic projection. This is incredible, Lieutenant Rivera breathed, watching as a solar system map resolved in the center of the room. Resolution's at least 10 times what we had groundside. The Deimos AI spoke again. I have optimized predictive telemetry using Specialist Khan's revised occlusion models. Efficiency increase, 22%. Khan blinked. 22%? In 3 seconds. Her pulse jumped with excitement. This was like Christmas wrapped in black-budget silk. Deimos wasn't just fast, it understood. I think I'm in love, she muttered. Try not to elope with the ship, Gibson said without looking. Up! No promises, sir, she replied with a grin. This processing capacity, it's beyond anything I've ever worked with. The quantum threading alone would make most supercomputers beg for mercy. Dr. Harper was equally enthralled, though for different reasons. Deimos. What biometric scanning? Capabilities do you have? Onboard, full-spectrum molecular analysis, genetic sequencing at the tertiary structure level, and real-time cellular modeling, the AI replied. Would you like me to prepare the xenobiology lab for your use, Dr. Harper? Yes, please, he said, like a child who'd just been offered free run of a candy store. Gibson observed his team's excitement with cautious approval. Enthusiasm was good. It led to innovation, to pushing boundaries. But he couldn't afford to let them get distracted by the technological marvels around them. Not with what lay ahead. "All right, people, let's focus," he said, bringing their attention back to the task at hand. "Khan, I want a full spectrum analysis of the Jovian anomalies. Compare current positions with historical data, see if you can establish a pattern of movement." "On it, sir." "Rivera, coordinate with ship security. I want our protocols integrated with theirs, seamlessly. No jurisdictional turf wars?" "Yes, sir." "Doc, get familiar with the xenobiology lab. If we encounter any gray tech or, God forbid, actual grays, I want you ready to analyze them down to the molecular level." "With pleasure, Colonel." Gibson turned back to the central display, studying the positions of the gray vessels near Jupiter's moons. Something about their arrangement nagged at him, a geometric precision that seemed almost... "Deimos," he called out. "The positioning of the gray ships. Run an analysis against known strategic formations, both terrestrial and theoretical extraterrestrial." "Processing," the AI responded. A moment later, a new overlay appeared on the display. "Pattern match found. Triangulation is consistent with long-range gravitic manipulation protocols. They appear to be establishing a resonance field across Jupiter's magnetosphere." "A communication array," Khan realized. "They're using the planet's natural electromagnetic field as an amplifier." "Or a weapon," Gibson said quietly. "Prepare for orbital insertion. We're going to Jupiter." October the 16th, 2037. Bark 0430. Mois hours. GMT. Ostersea Command Center. Later, Gibson stood alone in his command center, a secure AI-synchronized chamber connected to the ship's CIC but isolated from it. It was here that he monitored threat telemetry, command handoff protocols, and mission readiness. The Deimos had settled into silent orbit. The crew had integrated well. Everything was ready. And then the lights dimmed slightly. A tone pulsed. "Unscheduled. Telemetry match detected," Deimos announced. Gibson turned to the main display. "Location? Asteroid belt, sector 9 to C. Pattern similarity with known gray signatures, 87%. Significant power output detected." A star map filled the projection field, zooming to focus on the asteroid belt. A mass of swirling rocks and debris resolved into clarity, and among them, a shadow, larger and more distinctive than any asteroid. "Magnify," Gibson ordered. The display enhanced, revealing a massive vessel nestled deep within the belt. Unlike the staging platforms near Jupiter, this one was clearly designed for combat, an unmistakable warship with angular protrusions that could only be weapons arrays. "Does it match any known gray vessel configurations?" Gibson asked, his pulse quickening. "Confirmed, Colonel," Deimos replied. "Analysis indicates gray tech, but a battle cruiser. Dimensions approximately 2,000 meters in length. Configuration suggests heavily armed capital ship. 6 forward-mounted cannons detected. Analysis predicts their particle beam tech, each with estimated destructive capacity sufficient to neutralize a terrestrial urban center. The ship was a behemoth, easily 10 times the size of the Deimos. Its hull was a dark, non-reflective material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Nested around its central section were what appeared to be launch bays for smaller craft. Hundreds of them. "Fighter capacity?" Gibson asked, mentally calculating odds that were looking increasingly grim. "Estimated swarm complement? 5,000 to 7,000 craft," Deimos replied, "significantly larger than the staging platforms detected near Jupiter's moons." Gibson's jaw tightened. This wasn't a mere observation post or even a colony ship. This was a warship, a dreadnought designed for planetary assault. "Power signature analysis suggests weapon systems in dormant state," Deimos added. "However, energy readings are steadily increasing. They appear to be cycling up." He tapped the console. "Open internal comms, route me to the bridge." "Connected." "Captain." "Rourke, this is Gibson. I've got a gray battle cruiser hiding in the belt. Deep structure, heavily armed with city-killer beam weapons. Power signatures suggest they're powering up." Rourke's voice came through, tense. "We picking up movement? Any sign they've detected us?" "No movement yet, but they're active." "How sure are you about this assessment?" Gibson stared at the massive warship on the display, its weapon systems gradually cycling to readiness, its swarm bays prepared to unleash thousands of fighters. "Because this isn't just a staging operation," Gibson said, narrowing his eyes at the readout. "They're preparing for war." "With us?" Rourke asked, the question hanging in the air. Gibson didn't answer immediately. He watched the signal patterns. Ripple across the display, regular as a heartbeat, steady as a beacon. That, he said finally, is what we need to find out. October 16th, 2037, U500 hours. GMT, Captain's Ready Room. Captain Rourke's ready room was as austere as the man himself, functional, organized, with minimal personal touches save for a model of an ancient sailing vessel on his desk, the USS Constitution. A ship of war from a simpler time. Gibson, Khan, and Rourke gathered around a tactical display that showed the massive gray battlecruiser hiding in the asteroid belt. 6 particle beam cannons, Rourke said quietly, studying the weapon's profile. Each one capable of glassing a major city in seconds. And that's just what we can identify, Khan added, her fingers dancing across the display as she enhanced specific sections. The hull configuration suggests additional weapon systems we can't even classify yet. Gibson's expression remained grim. This isn't a scout ship or an observation platform. This is a capital warship. Why now? Rourke asked. The Greys have been observing Earth for decades without direct military action. What's changed? Gibson's jaw tightened. They've been studying us, testing our defenses, our response capabilities, the abductions, the probing. It was all intelligence gathering. And now they feel they have enough data to act, Khan concluded. Deimos, Gibson addressed the AI. Based on the positioning of the battlecruiser and the staging platforms near Jupiter, what strategic assessment can you provide? Analysis suggests a coordinated approach, the AI replied. The 3 vessels detected near Jupiter's moons appear to be forward staging areas, likely for long-term observation and potential resource extraction. The battlecruiser represents significant offensive capability, positioned to strike Earth while maintaining strategic distance. A classic pincer movement, Rourke muttered. They're boxing us in. No, Gibson corrected. They're preparing the battlefield. The Jupiter platforms are gathering intelligence, monitoring our orbital assets. The battlecruiser is their hammer. They don't need to box us in. Where would we go? Khan zoomed the display to show the relationship between Earth and the Grey vessel's current position. If they decide to move against Earth, our detection window would be minimal. Even at our best intercept velocity, we'd have less than 48 hours to respond. Rourke straightened. I'm elevating our alert status to combat readiness. We need to inform Strategic Command immediately. Agreed, Gibson said. But we also need more information. We can't go in blind. What are you suggesting, Colonel? A reconnaissance mission. Quiet, fast, minimal footprint. We send 2 interceptors with enhanced sensor packages to get detailed scans of the battlecruiser. Weapon systems, power nodes, potential weaknesses. Into the asteroid belt? Rourke didn't look convinced. That's extremely dangerous flying, even for our pilots. Major Valen can handle it, Gibson said with conviction, and we need that. Tactical data before we consider any larger operation. Rourke considered this for a moment, then nodded. Very well, I'll authorize the recon flight. But at the first sign of hostile activity, they abort. Understood. As they departed the ready room, Khan fell into step beside Gibson. This changes everything, doesn't it? We weren't expecting to find a full battlecruiser. No, Gibson acknowledged. But that's why we're here, to adapt, to respond. Do you think we have a chance against something like that? The size difference alone? Gibson stopped walking and turned to face her. Size isn't everything, Khan. The Deimos has advantages they don't expect. Hybrid tech, adaptive AI, and most importantly, the element of surprise. They still think we're primitive. They don't know what we've built. And if that's not enough? Gibson's expression hardened. Then we make it enough, because that's what humans do. As they continued toward the CIC to prepare for the reconnaissance mission, Gibson's mind was filled with tactical calculations and grim determination. The Greys had been an enigma for decades, harvesting humans like resources, testing Earth's defenses. But now their intentions were becoming clear. They weren't just observing anymore. They were preparing for war. And humanity needed to strike first, or risk never getting another chance. We've spent decades watching shadows, Gibson murmured. Now it's time to strike one. Continue it next video. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.